Hey folks, welcome back. So in the last video we talked about Alembic. So by using Alembic we do the database migrations. So in this video we will use SQLAlchemy with FastAPI to create the APIs. So let's get started with the basic architecture of our app. So yeah, here it is. So client sends a request and we will be having a main.py file which consists of a FastAPI app, and it connects the routers, middleware configurations, etc. And when we send the request from app, the request passes to routers, and routers sends the data to schemas, and schemas will validate the data if the data is passed. And from there we send the request to services. So by using services we do main business logic like validating and that stuff. uh, we want to make some database queries and then validate that. So all that logic goes in the service.py file, and services connect to queries to fetch the data from the database. So this is the basic architecture of our FastAPI application. So let's talk about SQLAlchemy a bit. So this is the basic architecture of the SQLAlchemy. So here we can see we have SQLAlchemy ORM and SQLAlchemy core. We have two components here. So by using SQLAlchemy core, we talk to the database. So we actually don't need SQLAlchemy ORM for this, but we'll be using both SQLAlchemy ORM and SQLAlchemy core to connect to the DB and make some queries. Okay, so yeah, let's go to VS Code and start the coding. Yeah, so to get started with our application, so we need to install these packages. So FastAPI, Pydantic, and SQLAlchemy, and SQLAlchemy binary tree. So I already installed all these packages. So let me try installing it again. Pip install FastAPI, Pydantic. Let me copy SQLAlchemy and SQLAlchemy too. So we can see that requirements are already satisfied. So without wasting this time, let's get started. Let me go here and create an app. Source main.py file, and from FastAPI import FastAPI equals to FastAPI. So we have created the FastAPI app, and then let's run it. Let me go here and uvcon rc.main app. So when we change the when we do some changes to the file, so our app needs to be restarted. So let's pass reload and let's run it. So now we can able to access the URL on browser. So we already started the development server. So let's go back to browser and let's check it. So we can see that our application is running, and there are no operations defined because we didn't create any. So let's go to our application architecture first. And so in order to talk to the database, we need to have the database connection, and the queries needs to be ready. So let's develop these two parts first. Let's go back to VS Code again. Let's create DB and base. So let's import from SQLAlchemy, import create engine, and from SQLAlchemy.orm import session maker. Let's create the engine. This, yeah. So here we can see that we have PostgreSQL and then username. So this is the string that we need. So we can see the same thing in SQLAlchemy documentation as well. Let me go and show you that. Let's go here. So here we can see that this is the thing that we need. Let me copy this and come back to our code. Let's paste that. So we need this database URL. Let's change it to DB URL and paste it here. Let's define the actual URL. DB URL equals to PostgreSQL and username, Postgres username, Postgres password, and host, and port, and DB name. Let's change this to dynamic because we don't want to use the load the passwords and usernames from directly into the code. So we need to load that from environment. So let's make those changes. This needs to be db user and db password, db host, db port. So let's import OS. db user equals to os dot get dnv. So this will get the variable from the environment. And let's do the same for password, host, port, and db name. We also need db name. So now we have the db name. So we are loading all this from environment itself. So we need to export that data. So let's do that. So I already added all export statements in here. So our db name is awesome store, and db user postgres root for the password. So you need to use the strong password. This is not recommended for production. So let's export all these. Let's stop our development server and export all these variables. So we have that. Let's rerun our application. Let's go to our so now we have the engine created. So we need to use the session for this. So let's create the session. Local session equals to session maker. So we need to bind the engine for this. Bind engine. So we need to use this session. So in order to use this session, so we need to create object for this local session and use that. So every time we don't need to do that. So that's the reason we need to have two functions which will create the session, and we can simply use that a decorator and function if needed. So let's create function get session and doesn't need any parameters. So session equals to local session and try yield. Okay, so we need to close the session after using. Okay, so for this this doesn't work without the context manager. So let's import that from context lib import context manager. So now we have this, and we need to use this in here. So now we have the get session. So once we use the session, so it will automatically closes the session. So let's have one more function or a decorator to get the session in our queries. Let me create that session, and which is a decorator. So I am expecting a function. So let's write the wrapper function inside this, and let's pass arguments and keyword arguments. And now we need to pass this session as a first argument to the function. So let's do that. As this is generator, we need to use with statement to get the session. So with get session as session and return function, pass session as first argument and the remaining args and URAGs. Let's return wrapper. So now we have this ready. Now we need to create queries and write the required functions for that. So before that, let's see the our database table, so that we'll get to know what table we are using to connect to and insert and fetch the data. Let's go back to pgadmin. So this is the table that we will be using. So it has ID, name, description, timestamp. So let's get back to our architecture. So now we have the database connection. So we need to implement these two things, queries and models. Let's do that. So let's create here. So we need to create that on service level. So models dot models. Inside that we need to create category. So here we will be using SQLAlchemy again to create the table from SQLAlchemy.ext declarative import declarative base. So by using this function, we will create a declarative base class. Base equals to declarative base. So now we need to define the table for category. So let's do that. Let do one line. So now category, let's inherit the base class, and then in this we need to mention table name. A table is category. Now we need to write all the required columns. So we already have the some kind of table definition in Alembic versions that we already created. So let's go there and copy the definitions from there. Let me copy these and come back in here. Let's paste that. Let's indent it properly. ID equals to and name equals to description equals to and timestamp equals to. Okay, so we don't need these commas anymore, but we need to import all these integer column and varchar. So let's copy that as well. If we copy this, that should do. Yeah. So now we have the table. Now we need to write the queries. Let's create okay, let's create queries. Inside that, let's create category.py file, and let's import session from the db that we created from db.base import session decorator. Let's write query insert category. So this needs a validated data for creating, for inserting the data. So we will be validating the data with FastAPI, Pydantic. So we need to use that Pydantic model. So let's do that. Okay, let's expect Pydantic schema model here. Let's write model. Yeah, okay, let's define the Pydantic model first. Let's go here and create schemas. Inside that we need a category schema. Let's create category.py file, and let's write the schema from Pydantic import base model class category model inherit a base model, and so we need two things here. So one is name and the other one is a description. So let's define that. Name, which is a string, so we need a constrained string constr here, and the minimum length is 1 and max length is 30 characters. And we also need a description. Description, which is also constrained string. Minimum length is 1 and the maximum length is 255 characters. So let's save this. So we will be using this model. So let's go back to queries and import it. Just for typing from schemas.category import category model. So let's use this as a type. Now we have this. We know how to work with Pydantic. If not, let's go back to the previous videos and see how we can use Pydantic. So let's write the query. So in order to do insert a query, so we need to write SQLAlchemy. So we'll be using SQLAlchemy core components from SQLAlchemy import insert, and we also need the table from models. Let's import that as well from models category import category. So this is the table that we'll be using. We can call it as model as well. Statement insert into category and values. So this expects a dict. So we need to convert Pydantic model to dict. So we have the addict function on addict method on Pydantic model. So model dot dict. Okay, so now we have the statement. We need to execute the query. I mean this statement. So I forgot to use session here. So because we are using this decorator, so this will pass the first variable, first argument as session. So we get the session, so we need to execute the query. Execute statement, and yeah, we need to save the result. Now we have the result. We need to commit the query. So session dot commit. So this will commit, and let's return the result dot inserted primary key. Let's return the primary key, inserted primary key. So now we have insert query, and yeah. So let's go back to our architecture and see the remaining components. So we have insert category query ready. So let's go to our architecture and see what is there. I mean, what is there to implement. Let me go back to Google Chrome again, and we can see the architecture. So this part is done. Now we need to create routers and services and connect these two. Okay, let's go back in here. Yeah, so we have, yeah, we need to create routers. Let's create a directory routers, and we need to create file category.py inside that. Now let's import from FastAPI, import API router. Let's create the router. Now we have the router. Let's define the endpoint. Router.host categories, and this is a post endpoint, so we need to return 201 status code 201 and create new category. And this so we need to we expect the data here. So let's use Pydantic model, which we already created in schemas. Let's import that from schemas.category import category model. So let's use that model category model, and for now just return the data, I mean the model data itself. Model dot dict. Let's save that and go to our docs. Okay, so we need to add the router to app. Let me go back to VS Code again. So let me go to main.py file and import the router from dot routers dot category. Okay, let's import category model itself. Category. So app dot include router category dot router. Okay, so we use this app dot include router to include the creator router in category. So let's save this and go back to the docs and just test it. Let me go back to our Google Chrome and refresh it. So now we can see the categories endpoint. Let's try it out. Let me send some sports, some sports or something. So we can see we are getting the 201 response code, status code, and the data back. But we need to validate the so yeah, Pydantic is already validating that. So we need to insert this data into the database. So we already created the insert queries, but we haven't tested it. It's the time to test it. Let me go back to the code. Okay, let's go to routers and Yeah, so we are missing the services layer. Let's create that. Services, let's create category.py file and create a category. So this will talk to queries. So let's insert the queries here. Dot queries dot category import insert category. So we need a Pydantic model for this category model. Okay, but now we need to use this insert query to insert the data. So let's directly pass the model. Okay, but let's talk about the categories endpoint. So if the category is already there, then we don't want to create the category again. So for that, we need to talk to the DB, and if the category name is already there, then we need to throw some validation error. Otherwise, we need to insert the DB. I mean, insert the data into the DB. So in order to do that, we need to have one more query to check whether the category already exists with the given name or not. Let's go back to queries and implement that. Queries category, and let's write session def fetch category by name. Okay, name. Yeah, so we need to do a select query on this. Let's insert select. So statement select category where category dot name equals to name. So we can check all the query syntax in SQLAlchemy documentation. So for now, just follow this. Assume you know that and follow that. Okay. We need to okay. I also forgot we need to have session here because we are using the session decorator. So let's do session result equals to session dot execute the statement and return result dot scales dot one or none. Let's import the statement in services. Okay, let's write if model dot name is not none, then we need to raise exception that category is already exists. So otherwise validate category exists, create category. So now we have this. Now we need to connect this to routers. Let's go back to routers and let's use try block, try accept as E. So now we have that, and let's return PK for now. If there is any error happens, then we need to return the 400 response status code. Let's do that read. Okay, so we actually raise exception and FastAPI will automatically take care of that. So raise HTTP exception. So not this, we should inherit sorry, we should import that from FastAPI. Okay, so we didn't have we didn't import the category create category from services, so we need to do that. Services dot category import create category. So now we have that. Okay, we need to raise the exception properly. Status code equals to 400 and detail equals to tr of e. So we convert exception to string and then pass it back. So now let's go back to docs and test the endpoint. Okay, let me refresh and let's try it out. Name, electronics, and description. Let's execute. We can see that we got the ID back, but that is not what we wanted. We need to get the proper response, which is a JSON response. Let's go back and write the Pydantic response model for this. Let's go back to code. Now we need to return it. So we need to get the object from the database and return that. Let's go to services and write get get category. So we need to get that by primary key ID. So we need pk as argument for this. So now we need to send the now we need to create a query and get the data from database. Let me go back to queries and write that first. So now we are fetching the data by name. So now we need to get this with the primary key, which is pk. Let me replace this with id and this with pk, because we didn't have pk attribute on our table. So id is the primary key for that. So that's the reason we are using that. Now we need to save this and we need to change name to id. Okay, let's copy this and go to services and import that. Import that here. So now we need to return which category by id and let's pass the pk there. Now we have these. Let's do that and come back to routers, and now let's fetch the object equals to get category. We also need to import this from services. Now we have that. We need to pass the pk here. Let's return object. So we have this endpoint ready, and let's go back to our docs in browser and let's try this out. Let's change this electronics to sports and awesome sports. You can have any description you want. Let's try this. Now we can see the data coming back. Let me try it again. We can see that the category already exists. So it's working fine, but we need to have Pydantic response model if we don't want to if we want to skip some attributes or something. Let's say, let me change the sports to something and execute it. So now we have all these four. Let's say I don't want to send timestamp back. Then I just need to have a response model which will where I'll specify what needs to be sent back. So let me go back to code again and specify response model. That should be category response model. So we haven't written that, but we need to. Let me go back to schemas and let's add that class category model and base model. We just need id integer. And we also need these two fields, but so that's the reason I'm just inheriting the category model in here. So that's it. And so here if we go to routers, so it's returning the SQLAlchemy object, so which is which can be directly converted back. Let's try that and see if this works. Category response model. Okay, what's that? We can ignore that. Let's go back to browser and check the logs. Let's try something true. We can see exception here. So it's not a valid date. So we need to pass the proper response, or we need to specify ORM mode. So let's see what can be done. Okay. If we go to Pydantic, so here we have a config that needs to be set to ORM mode true. So if we do this, so the error should be fixed. Let me go back VS Code and add that to schemas. Yeah, let's go to Pydantic model, response model, and add that. So now let's go back to docs and try it out. Let's try awesome category. Description can be anything. So yeah, we can see that now we can see only these three attributes that we mentioned. If we didn't want timestamp, then we can do something like this. So this is how we connect to SQLAlchemy, I mean the database using SQLAlchemy, and make the queries. So let me simply explain this using the architecture. So now when we send the request, it comes to main.py, and then it will be passed to routers based on the request path. And if there is any data validation, the basic data validation that we perform using schemas, and after that we send that data to services where we have the main logic that is written, and the services connect to queries, I mean the DB queries, and query starts to the DB and fetches the data back or insert the data into the database. So this is how we use the SQLAlchemy to insert the data into the DB. So if you find this content is useful, then hit like button, share, and subscribe to the channel.